Welcome back. Well, as we had promised, on Perspective, we are fortunate to have our first guest, Honorable Musalia Mudavadi. Thank you very much, Mheshimiwa, for honoring our invitation, really.
Yeah, thank you, Tom. I think for me, it's also a big honor because here you are coming back in a big way.
Yeah.
And I become your first guest.
Thank you.
Who would ask for more?
Exactly. And we're really delighted that, that you came through. Now, let's just get straight into it. You have been in politics for close to, I think, 4 decades. And you have served in 3 administrations. You've had some wins, you've had some losses. But you keep going. You keep going on and on and on. And my first question is, what drives you?
First of all, let me just correct you. Yes, I've been in for about 30 years plus.
Yeah.
But I've only served 2 regimes. Not
2 regimes, thanks for that correction. Exactly, 2 regimes.
That is the Mboya regime and the Grand Coalition.
Yeah, but over a period of 30 years.
Roughly 30
Very
years.
long time.
What drives me?
Yeah.
The passion for the country. The desire to be able to be part of a positive influence in our country. I would like to see a robust economy. I would like to see a very responsive educational system, good health services, a country that has the rule of law and respects the rule of law. I would like to see an economy that is working for all people, for
and
all
thriving.
Kenyans, and thriving. So this keeps on driving me to be part of wanting to serve the people of Kenya.
So against that background, what would you frame as your guiding principles?
Honesty, integrity, dedication, the need to strengthen families, because that is a very important unit, and ultimately to have an economy that allows the young man and woman to put food on the table.
Put on the table.
For their families.
For their families. And in addition to that, Gandhiji, Mahatma Gandhi's philosophy was simple living, high thinking. What is yours?
Well, I think I've read a bit of Gandhi, and I think he came out very well. He's a man whose philosophies you would appreciate. Simplicity, but depth in thinking and depth in reach to the people. And by the way, this is also the Quaker value. I'm a Quaker, and Quakers basically believe in simplicity as much as they have to serve the country.
Okay. Now, I remember during the launch of your autobiography, was it Soaring Above the Storms?
Yeah, the Storms of Passion, yeah.
Your mom described you as a very polite young man in your younger days. And she told reporters about a story about how one day you came back home and found that your siblings had been shipped off to a faraway place, some place called Njoro.
Yes.
To a boarding facility.
Correct.
And it bothered you. And these were your mom's words. You almost threw tantrums, and that was unlike you. I just want you to tell us more about that.
Well, I was a young boy. I was a young kid.
Yeah.
And in a family, when you're born and you have your siblings with you, that is your world, so to speak. So when you find that there's a dislocation that I was not able to understand appropriately at that time because they were older and therefore they were going to boarding school, and I was going to be left at home, there's a vacuum in the context of who will you mingle with.
Yeah.
So to that extent, I can imagine at that age, I would have done what every other young child would have done to express the displeasure and the concern. So if I did throw a tantrum, then it was in that context.
Yeah.
Yes.
And she said that was really unlike you.
Yes, but you see, I was young. I was very young. I was an infant, basically. But nevertheless, the fact of the matter is that I have maintained my calmness over the years. I prefer to deal with issues logically rather than emotionally.
Okay.
Sometimes you can be emotional, all right.
Yeah.
But logic should be the prevailing factor at any one time.
And we're going to talk about that more a little later.
Yes.
I just want to stay with family first, because I know your father was a very powerful minister back in the days. And he grew from a teacher, you know, all the way to the Mboya's cabinet.
Yes.
And he was seen as being responsible for delivering the Luya vote in those days. Are you a chip of that old block?
Well, I am. I am my father's son.
Tell me more about that.
That's the fact of the matter. And I can tell you that it is true that he was a powerful politician during his time. That the way politics was handled was different. Remember, we were largely under one-party state in those days.
That's right.
But now we are in a multi-party system. Communication is much more robust in society. The demographics are very different than they were at that time.
Yeah.
So he played his role. And I can tell you I'm playing my role today very effectively in connecting with the people of Western Kenya and indeed Kenyans in other parts of our country.
Yeah, the reason I ask that question on character, and I want you to respond to this before we take a break, is because the character question arises from time to time.
Yeah.
And you're right. Some people actually describe you as, oh, he's a very gentle person, very, very measured.
Yeah.
And, you know, he does not scare away the extreme elements in rival camps. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. But others use very harsh adjectives to describe you. Broadly speaking, most people are agreed on your fiscal policies. But there are those who feel that to realize economic growth, it requires some radical muscle. And that's what I want you to speak to before we take a break.
My friend, I was Minister for Finance at the age of 33. The country was in the doldrums. There were very, very serious structural and governance issues that had taken us to the bottom of the hole. I came out and I stood out and I transformed this country. I liberalized this country and the economy of this country to the extent that I was rated as a Minister for Finance in Africa who had presided over the most elaborate and rapid liberalization of the economy. And along the way, I closed financial institutions that were not meeting the requirements. Along the way, I got a lot of changes brought into this country. That was a question of diplomacy and the way you think and the way you present your logic. Matters like this is not about the brawn, it's about the brain. And I want to tell people is that even if we have to bring discipline, okay, and in fact, if you go back, the first budget I presented as Minister for Finance talked about resilience and discipline. And that is what we have lost. We have lost our discipline in the management of public affairs. And it has put us into trouble. And this needs somebody to bring us back to the rail.
You talk about brawn. And whenever the question of the big C comes up, corruption, You're dealing with people who are smart. So why is it that the poll is so high, you know, in regards to
Let me tell you why I talk about brawn and rather than brain rather than brawn.
Yeah.
Let's take the hub of corruption. At that time, it was something called import licensing, exchange controls. The moment we eliminated that and we were able to have a unified exchange rate, we swept away a very good and large chunk of corruption activities, rent-seeking stages. So we need systems that will work. Now, to fight corruption, we cannot fight it if you're in constant conflict with the judiciary. You cannot fight corruption if you underfund the judiciary, you underfund the ethics and corruption body, you underfund the DPP, you underfund the DCI. And I can tell you the figures. When you give the courts 18 billion shillings, you give the Office of the Director of Public Prosecution roughly 3 billion. You give EACC roughly 3 billion. You give DCI roughly 5 billion. All right? Then you give Parliament 40 billion.
Straight imbalance.
Straight imbalance. Yet these are the institutions that are supposed to sort out these things.
The big C. So why don't we take a short break? Because I just want to remind our viewers, we were asking a question. We were asking them whether they would, make you vote or not vote. What exactly would make them vote or not vote for Musalia Mudavadi as the 5th president? Just send your comments on our social media platforms that are displayed on your screen. And when we come back, the second part of this interview with Honorable Musalia Mudavadi. Stay with us.